It's time for Harvey's Hot Takes with our opinionist, Bryan Hayes. Yes, each and every Wednesday, we ask Bryan to dish out 3 takes as hot as a Harvey's original burger. Look at that thing. Delicious. All right, Bryan, let's start with Joey Votto, who looks to be on track to join the Jays in Grapefruit League action on Sunday after playing some minor league games. Now, when it was announced on Friday that he was signed to a tryout deal, what was your immediate reaction?
My immediate reaction was simple, Glenn. It was that the Jays are doing Joey Votto a favor here, right? If they really wanted Votto, if they were really adamant about bringing him in, they would have signed him months ago when he was available, as opposed to, 10, 14 days into spring training. It's a minor league contract. They've been very clear on that. He is not guaranteed anything. But what he's going to get out of this is an opportunity to show the Blue Jays, but also, more importantly, possibly show the other teams in baseball that he's still got something here. And it's an incredible story. The story of Joey Votto. He's a baseball freak, right? He wants to keep playing. I think in a perfect world, he would be with the Cincinnati Reds. I don't believe for a second he's always dreamt of being a Blue Jay throughout his major league career. In fact, I've interviewed him multiple times, and he said that. He wanted to stay in Cincinnati. He loved being a Red. But now he doesn't have that opportunity. The Reds have moved on, and he wants to continue to play. And I think he wants to chase down Larry Walker, right? Larry Walker's got 25 more hits than him in his career in terms of Canadian-born MLB players. I think that's a number that Votto's very aware of, and Votto wants to play. So the Jays are looking at this as saying, we'll give you an opportunity. It's obviously going to play well back in Toronto, and they could use some positive PR. And I think if we're being frank here, if he was born in St. Paul, Minnesota, Joey Votto would not be in Dunedin, Florida right now. But he's not. He's from Toronto, and he's obviously had a great career. But they just signed Vogelback, who's a left-handed bat off the bench that can't defend. They have their veteran in Justin Turner. So I'm not sure where Votto fits in here, but I think he owes the Jays the basically a thank you, and a big one, because he wants to prove that he can keep playing, to chase Walker, to possibly chase Cooperstown, to add to his legacy. And if it's not in Toronto, it could be somewhere else. But in order for it to be somewhere else, a team had to give him that chance. And ultimately, that's going to be the Blue Jays. And who knows? Maybe he has a great camp, Glenn, and he breaks camp with the Jays, and that would be an incredible story, right? He is from Toronto. They'd sell a ton of jerseys. It would be great for business. There'd be a lot of people that would be buzzing about that. I'm not convinced he can play anymore. I'm not convinced the Jays believe he can play anymore. But he's a Toronto guy. He's down in Dunedin, getting some hacks in with the Blue Jays. And if it doesn't work here, I think at a minimum, Votto's hoping another team in the league could say, we could use you, and maybe they sign him too.
Yeah, let's see how this one plays out. Let's switch to the NHL, where Matt Rempe was suspended on Tuesday for that vicious elbow, 4 games. And it's been an eventful few weeks, Hazy, for Rempe to begin his NHL career. Seems like he's already a folk hero at Madison Square Garden. But do you think it's getting a little bit out of hand already with Rempe?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think the NHL has to be terrified where this is going with Matt Rempe, because like you mentioned, he has been on the border with a number of these hits in the past, just on the border, where the NHL determined it was just clean enough where they weren't going to suspend him. He's been kicked out of games before, and then you saw what happened against Jersey a couple of nights ago, where he crossed that border. He steamrolled across it to the point where he throws his elbow out. It's a bad hit. It's an ugly hit, and it's a hit that deserved a minimum 4-game suspension, in my opinion, and that's what he ended up getting. If he was a multiple-time offender, it would have been way more than 4 games. But Rempe came in, and he was immediately a guy that had people talking. And I would argue he has possibly supplied a crazier 2 or 3 weeks worth of just viral moments, water cooler conversations that maybe anyone else in the league has over the course of a 2 or 3 week span. Certainly more than any other rookie. I would include Connor Bedard in that. That's how crazy this Rempe story's been. And it began with, wow, he's a young guy and he's courageous, and maybe the league has to protect him, or the Rangers have to protect him, because all these old heavyweight fighters are trying to get at him. And now it's flipped to, the league needs to maybe realize here that Rempe needs to cool it, because he's going way overboard with some of these hits. And I think the end of this, in terms of where I'm going with this, Glenn, the reason the NHL might be terrified by this is because we saw Curtis McDermott, who had just got to New Jersey, decided he wanted to have a word with Rempe, and he offered him the fight. Rempe turned it down. And then on the way out of the game, when he had kicked out of the game, he starts waving at him. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm watching that, This has got to be a terrifying moment for the NHL, because the next time these two teams meet, there's a very good chance McDermott's not going to offer him a fight. He's going to just drag him into one. And whenever you start talking about scenarios like that, where players around the league are not going to be gratuitous about it, they're simply going to start throwing, that's when it gets very dangerous. And this is the precarious position the NHL's in right now. We know why they can't and they won't promote fighting and big hits, because of the history of the game, because of lawsuits, because of science, because of concussions. Yet it causes a massive stir, and there's a massive fan base for it, and a lot of people that are really engaged by this Rempe story and other heavyweight fights that are happening. But it can also tip and go completely overboard. And if it gets to a point where you get something crazy happening on the ice, because Rempe is causing all these storms around the league, and someone grabs them and someone does something really heinous, then you're really going to have a circus on your hands. And I'm sure the NHL's aware of it, and I'm sure the NHL's really, really desperately hoping it doesn't get to that point.
Yeah, like a full-on back to the 80s line brawl going on at MSG next time they meet. We'll see. Finally, how about the Ottawa Senators? They had lost 7 in a row before beating the Penguins on Tuesday. They were swept, though, recently in the Tour of California, even lost to the Coyotes. It's ugly in Ottawa. And you think, Brian, that the issue begins with what's going on behind the bench?
Absolutely. I think it's a massively missed opportunity for Ottawa. When it comes to their coach, what are the Sens waiting for? They should have replaced DJ Smith with their next coach, as opposed to bringing in Jacques Martin, who obviously has a ton of history there, is a very well-respected guy, but he's got no future there. It's well-established. He is simply holding down the fort, and it's turning into a supply teacher type 5. You mentioned it. They lost to Arizona recently. No one loses to Arizona, let alone at home, which is what Ottawa did. They went through California and they embarrassed themselves. You lose to Anaheim and San Jose on the same trip, that's borderline impossible. And that's what Ottawa's doing here. And obviously they have no structure right now. Nothing is set up for their future in terms of what type of seeds are being planted for success. And it's getting to a point where it almost feels like they're tanking. And I know that's not the case, because you got Steve Stais there, you got Dave Poole in there, you got a new owner there, and they've got a bunch of young pieces that they like. And they're committed to their goaltenders, which I think is a big part of the issue as well. But this is not a scenario where they're openly tanking. This is not like San Jose. This is not like Chicago a year ago. Ottawa thought they would be a playoff team this year. They thought they would be a competitive team, and it's been a disaster, and it keeps getting worse. And I wish, for their standpoint, they took a page out of the Vancouver Canucks book with what happened with Rick Tocchet last year. And when Tocchet took over, it was well established. Vancouver was not going anywhere. They were not going to go on some miracle run and make the playoffs. But what Rick Tocchet was able to do was get in on the scene, on the ground level, see the players that work, see the players that don't, and establish a system and a culture immediately. And as a result, he's a part of the draft, he's a part of free agency, he's involved in the summer, and we saw the payoff this year. And I'm not suggesting that if they hired the man that they were looking for in Ottawa, that they'd have the exact same results next year as Vancouver did, but I think it could be a lot closer to that. And if it was Craig Berube or someone else who's currently employed, if you could have found a way to establish that head coach and get him in now, or get him in a month ago, 2 months ago, they've had a long time to do this, I think it would have been really, really beneficial. And I think because they went with the stopgap in Jacques Martin, it's getting uglier and uglier and uglier, and it very well could actually have worse ramifications of what they do into the offseason and how they get off to a good start or bad start come next fall.
That's a good point, that comparison to Vancouver. For anyone who says coaching doesn't matter, just point to Rick Tocchet and what he's done in the Canucks in about a year. Well, just like Harvey's serving Canadians for 65 years, Bryan Hayes has been serving up the hot take since 1983. And Jay asked me to throw this one in. 1983, also the year that Mr. Mom, starring Michael Keaton, was the 7th highest grossing movie of the year. Thanks for this, Brian.
I love it. Thank you, Glenn.
Hot Takes is presented by Harvey's. Customize your burger and get it delivered from our app to your door. Harvey's, it's a beautiful thing.